I knew she was hiding something, but I couldn't imagine how deep it went. Listen to the end. The denouement will amaze you. The morning it all started, I was slicing through a too-ripe banana with a butter knife, distracted by the way Amy's nails tapped against her phone screen like a private metronome. We had this rhythm in the kitchen, me handling breakfast, her pretending to scroll news while really checking Instagram. But that morning the rhythm slipped. Her thumb hovered too long. She giggled, the kind of laugh that doesn't belong to a husband. I glanced up just as a shimmering kiss gif vanished from her screen and she locked the phone with the same grace she'd use hiding a gift behind her back. Her eyes darted to mine and she gave me a fake sleepy smile. "Everything okay?" I asked, measuring my tone like I was calibrating for a tripwire. She nodded too quickly. I said nothing more. That evening I changed into the black shirt I'd been saving for the concert. I had bought the tickets a month ago, center seats, her favorite band. We had both been excited, or I thought we had, but as I walked into the bedroom with the tickets in hand, Amy was already curled up under a throw blanket, lights off, one hand pressed to her temple. "I'm not feeling well," she muttered. "Migraine." Her voice didn't waver. No apology, no guilt, just the rehearsed confidence of someone who knew I wouldn't fight it. I told her I'd go alone, trying to hide the confusion under a nod. She didn't even look up. It wasn't until I was back home scrolling through my banking apps like I always did, habit more than paranoia, that I saw it. Her Venmo account, left open on her tablet by the kitchen counter. One transaction, sent around the same time the concert started. "For the perfect night, baby." My name wasn't on it. The profile photo was a shadowed silhouette of someone in a baseball cap. The tablet blinked to the home screen before I could take a screenshot. She had already deleted the messages. The next morning she made waffles. She danced around the kitchen like nothing happened. She even put blueberries on mine, the ones I liked. I ate them in silence, mentally replaying every second of the night before like a detective reviewing shaky footage. When she asked if I slept well, I said, "Sure." That evening she came to me, brushing her hair back and smiling like she needed a favor. "Hey, can I borrow a little for a gift for my mom?" she asked casually. "Just a couple hundred." I nodded without blinking. "Of course." But inside, my mind was already racing. Later that day, I sat in the living room with a copy of our joint credit report pulled up. A new charge from that morning caught my eye. $600 at a designer clothing boutique downtown. Amy had claimed she was at the pharmacy picking up cold medicine. The store was only 15 minutes away and I had time. I went. I told the staff I was her husband and she had lost a receipt. I asked if they could help me identify the purchase. The clerk, an older woman with a kind smile, nodded. She led me to the back where the manager pulled up the receipt on screen and then checked the camera log. It didn't take long to find the footage. There she was, Amy in her beige coat, laughing, hugging a man at the register. He wore a navy baseball cap, just like the profile picture on the Venmo. She leaned into him like they belonged to each other. Then she handed over my card and paid. They walked out together. I didn't get angry. I didn't say a word. I walked back to the car, stared through the windshield, and forced myself to breathe. The city looked the same, but everything inside me was shifting like wet cement. She thought I was blind, that I'd never follow the trail, that I'd nod along forever while she snuck around, left crumbs like they'd never be noticed. On the way home, I stopped at a bookstore and bought a plain leather notebook, brown, unmarked, the kind that doesn't ask questions. That night, after she kissed me goodnight and turned away in bed like she always did lately, I got up and wrote the first entry. Friday, 9:14 p.m. Location: Clothing Boutique, 7th and Hawthorne event. Amy arrived with unidentified mail, approximately 6 feet 2 inches. Baseball cap, navy. Hugged, laughed, paid with joint card. $600, left together. The words looked clinical on paper, like evidence. I stared at them until the weight of reality pressed too hard on my chest. The next morning, I went to the bank and canceled our joint account. She didn't ask why. That night, we watched a movie together on the couch. Her head rested on my shoulder. She whispered a joke into my ear, and I laughed at the punchline like nothing was wrong. But in the other room, behind the closet door, sat the notebook, waiting for the next entry. By the time Sunday came, I had memorized the layout of our living room like a battlefield. I knew exactly how the light fell through the blinds by noon, how the shadows stretched just beyond the bookshelf around 3. It was quiet work, methodical. On the surface, I was just a man rearranging a painting slightly higher on the wall, but behind it, I fixed a lens no bigger than a coin. A new camera, discreet, Wi-Fi enabled, motion activated. It didn't blink. It didn't breathe. It just watched. She had no idea. Not when she walked by brushing her teeth. Not when she laughed at some trashy show on her phone, feet kicked up, texting someone with her screen tilted away from me. Not even when she leaned over the counter one morning in a silk robe, tapping something into her tablet before glancing toward the hallway to see if I was coming. She never suspected a thing. The second device was simpler. Our smart home hub, the one we barely used outside of weather updates and turning on the lights with lazy commands. I activated the voice recording feature, buried the logs behind encrypted access, just in case words needed to be remembered later. She didn't question it when I left for a supposed business trip, left my suitcase by the door, added an out-of-office message to my email, even texted her from a hotel Wi-Fi hotspot once I reached the real location. A second-floor room in a nearby hotel, 15 minutes from home. I wasn't going far. I wasn't really leaving. I was watching. 2 days in, the camera activated at 7:43 p.m. Amy walked through the front door like she was home from work, tossing her purse on the table. A moment later, he followed. Taller than me, square jaw, baseball cap again. He moved through our space like he'd been there before, like nothing about it was new or off limits. They opened wine. She poured his glass first. They sat on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, and as the wine dropped lower in the bottle, her words got looser. My phone buzzed with the live feed. I turned the volume down to a whisper but didn't mute it. I wanted to hear every syllable. "This is my house," she said, swirling the wine in her glass. "I do what I want here." That line, it dug itself under my skin and nested there. Not because she said it with defiance, because she said it with comfort, like she really believed it. The man, Jared, as I'd later learn, put his arm around her. She leaned in. My couch, my throw blanket, the lamp I fixed when it shorted out last winter. All of it reduced to set dressing for someone else's private scene. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning before the sun came up, I drove back to the house. She was still asleep. I could tell by the undisturbed sheets and the faint, familiar click of her phone charger in the bedroom. I didn't linger. I went straight to the safe. It sat inside the bedroom closet behind my suits. She never paid much attention to it. She thought it held our passports, maybe a few sentimental things. In reality, it held copies of every document that mattered. House deed, car title, insurance policies, marriage license. I removed them all, replaced the folder with blank pages and a decoy envelope. Then I went into the home office and unplugged the physical drive I'd set up as a backup to the cloud folder, where the video was now saved twice. I added both flash drives to a small pouch I kept on my keyring. One would stay with me. The other I'd leave at my office desk. Before I left again, I did one more thing. I filed the paperwork to unregister the property as joint-owned. It would take time. It wasn't immediate, but it was enough. It was the first real movement in the chain reaction I had been building. I walked out of that house while Amy still dreamed beside the man who thought this was just a fling, just a stolen moment. Back at the hotel, I opened my notebook and turned to a fresh page. Tuesday, 7:43 p.m. Event. Amy returns home with mail, ID unknown. Wine opened, couch use confirmed. Phrase recorded, "This is my house. I do what I want here." Footage, 23 minutes. Saved, copied, witnessed. I stared at the page long after I finished writing. Not to think, just to sit in the truth. I wasn't angry anymore. I was something quieter, something colder. A man recording his own erasure in reverse, step by step, line by line. A week later, I returned to the house under the excuse of forgotten laundry. She greeted me like nothing had happened. Her smile was light, her tone sweet, her arms draping around my shoulders like I was still the man she kissed in sincerity. But I had seen how she smiled at someone else. And worse, I had heard how she talked about me when she thought no one was listening. I asked her about her week. She mentioned yoga, grocery shopping, a work dinner that never existed. Not once did she say, "I missed you." I told her I'd be out again by the weekend. She kissed my cheek and said, "Don't forget to pack the blue shirt." I nodded and added another note that night. Saturday, 9:02 a.m. Event, Amy mentions fictitious work dinner. No reference to in-home visitor. Demonstrates rehearsed conversation. Blue shirt comment noted. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sharpened the point of my pen and kept writing. There's a quiet satisfaction that comes from watching someone walk into a trap they think they built for you. By now, I had filled nearly half the notebook. Dates, quotes, receipts, names. I had learned to write in tight, straight lines, neat as thread. Some entries were only 2 sentences long. Others stretched paragraphs, especially the nights Amy and Jared got comfortable enough to talk freely. They spoke as if the walls didn't remember, but mine did. I'd made sure of it. After the second visit from Jared, I knew I needed more than cameras and bank statements. I needed reach, and I needed someone who didn't blink at betrayal. The private investigator I hired was named Chris Breyer. He came highly recommended through a friend from work, someone who had used him to dig through a business partner's offshore laundering scheme. When Chris arrived at our meeting spot, a dull corner booth at a diner just off the interstate, he looked like someone who knew how to disappear in daylight. Graying stubble, loose windbreaker, zero interest in small talk. I slid the flash drive across the table. He plugged it into his battered laptop without asking questions. As the footage played, Amy's laughter, Jared's hand sliding over hers, the words, "I do what I want here." Chris didn't flinch. When it ended, he nodded once and pulled a yellow notepad from his jacket. "What do you want first?" he asked. "His name, then his record. Everything," I said. "I don't need drama. I need facts." 2 days later, Chris sent me a file with the subject line, Lewis Jared, full profile. The report read like the highlight reel of a quiet failure. Jared Lewis, 39, accountant out of Raleigh, divorced twice, one child in Wisconsin, monthly alimony behind by almost 4 months. Previous employer docked his salary over unreported bonuses. His LinkedIn photo was 5 years out of date. His smile looked honest there. The rest of his life did not. Debt, enforcement orders, pending lien on a small property in Garner. The kind of man who dreams in spreadsheets and lies to stay afloat. A man who looks stable in a dating profile, but cracks if you tap the surface. Chris had also uncovered Jared's routine. Every Thursday afternoon, Jared visited a cafe near the East Side Park, a quiet, middle-tier spot with just enough privacy for side deals or personal escapes. It was where he met Amy once, though they left separately. That was where I planned to meet him. I created a new identity for this part. Fake profile, fake name. Lena R., recent transplant from Charlotte looking for a roommate situation and possible rental in the area. Chris helped with the setup. New number, matching photo, casual, flirty tone. We baited the hook. It didn't take Jared long to respond. Men like him are always scanning for soft targets. He thought I was another lonely woman who'd feel lucky to get his attention. He offered to meet Lena at the cafe, said he had some advice on navigating rent in the city. Said he liked to help. I nearly laughed. When I arrived, I wore sunglasses, a gray hoodie, and sat 2 tables behind him. I had an audio recorder in my pocket. Chris sat at the corner by the window, pretending to read a paper. We didn't need visuals. We just needed the words. Jared arrived on time, alone, scanning for Lena. I had sent a message 20 minutes earlier saying I was running late. Classic bait. He ordered an iced coffee, checked his phone twice. Then he made a call. I didn't have to hear the other side to know who he was calling. "Yeah," he said. "She's probably flaking." "Nah, it's fine. We still good for tonight?" A pause. "Nah, her husband's gone again. Idiot doesn't even suspect. I swear I stole that man's wife, and he thanks her for folding his laundry." He chuckled. That was all I needed. I signaled to Chris, who tapped a button on his phone to lock the audio. I stood up, walked past Jared slowly, and exited without a word. He never looked up. By the time I got back to my car, the file was already uploaded. The first thing I did was email it to myself. The second, I opened Jared's LinkedIn page one more time and copied the name of his employer. Harrison and Clyde Financial Services, a mid-size accounting firm built on reputation and trust. I sent the audio file to their corporate inbox with the subject, Conduct of Your Employee. Urgent review recommended. No commentary, no threats. Just the file. Just the truth. 2 days later, Jared Lewis was unemployed. Amy didn't mention it. Either she didn't know yet, or she thought it was unrelated. But she started coming home tense, eyes darting to her phone more often. One night, while she pretended to do yoga in the living room, I noticed her swiping through messages with a look I hadn't seen before. Not flirtatious, not sneaky, nervous. I made tea that evening and handed her a mug. She smiled too hard. Her hand shook slightly when she took it. It was the smallest crack. But cracks are where the light gets in, or in my case, where the fire starts. Later that night, I wrote in the notebook again. Thursday, 5:16 p.m. Event, subject Jared Lewis terminated from employer. Audio submitted anonymously. Subject response pending. Amy exhibiting signs of stress. Observation ongoing. I closed the notebook and placed it back in its hiding place behind the false panel under my desk drawer. She wouldn't find it. She never looked in the places that mattered. She thought the game was still hers. She didn't know the pieces were already moving without her. Thanksgiving came earlier that year, or maybe it just felt like it. The leaves were barely crisp. The air still carried heat, but the house had already been dressed in garlands and hollow rituals. Amy cooked like she hadn't burned down everything behind her. She floated through the kitchen in an apron she hadn't worn since the year we got engaged. Same smile, same voice, like she could still sell the performance to people who'd already bought the lie 1,000 times. I played along. I stirred the gravy. I set the table. I even carved the turkey with a practiced steadiness that made Amy's mother beam. "You always had such clean hands," she said with a soft, wine-sweetened laugh. "Like a surgeon." Amy's father didn't speak much. He rarely did. A quiet man who measured every glance, every opinion. I knew how to read his silences better than most. That night they were thick, watching, waiting. Amy wore a necklace I didn't recognize. Delicate, expensive, and new. Dinner began like all family dinners. Bottled tension, half-hearted compliments, and a performance of belonging. Her brother asked me about work. Her mother commented on how thin Amy looked. Amy smiled and deflected and refilled wine glasses with the ease of someone hoping to blur the edge of truth. I waited until dessert. The table was glowing with candlelight when I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask for attention. I simply placed a black velvet box in the center of the table and pushed it gently toward Amy. "Open it," I said. She hesitated. Her fingers lingered on the edge of the box like it might bite. She opened it. Inside was a stack of folded papers. Neatly printed, clipped, ordered. On top was the Venmo transaction. "For the perfect night, baby." Underneath, the clothing store receipt with my card number blurred and a time-stamped camera still of her, hugging Jared. Then the transcript from the cafe meeting. At the bottom of the stack, a flash drive. "What is this?" her father asked, his voice cutting through the air like steel on glass. I didn't look at Amy when I spoke. "This," I said, "is a summary of how your daughter supports the family." Her mother gasped. Her fork clattered to the table. Her brother sat back slowly, eyes dark with something like dawning recognition. Amy didn't speak. Her mouth hung open, blinking, jaw clenched like she was trying to invent a defense but hadn't found the right script. "You're lying," she whispered. I looked at her for the first time that night. "Play the flash drive," I said. "Start with the living room footage. Around 7:43 p.m. Tuesday. Your words, Amy. Your wine. Your perfect night." She stood up so suddenly her chair scraped against the hardwood. "You invaded my privacy." "No," I said. "I documented my property, my bank accounts, my house, my life." Her father reached across the table, pulled the documents closer. His hands didn't tremble. He scanned the pages like they were balance sheets, nodding once at each line. He looked at his daughter, not like a father, but like a man auditing the collapse of something he had invested in for too long. "You told me you were working overtime," her brother said, voice low. "You said Tom was the distant one, that he wasn't present anymore." Amy didn't answer. Her cheeks were red now, her breath shallow, her fingers twitching around the napkin in her lap. "I think we're done here," I said, straightening my sleeves. "Amy, I'll text you a list of what you can come collect. Everything else stays." "You can't just throw me out," she snapped, her voice cracking. "I already did," I replied. I left the box on the table, walked to the door, and didn't look back when I heard her mother begin to cry. That night, I packed her things into 6 garbage bags. Not suitcases, not boxes, bags. I laid them out on the lawn like refuse waiting for collection. I changed the locks. I disabled her phone from our plan. I called the bank and terminated her card access. It wasn't revenge. It was an eviction. Around midnight, I heard her pull up, tires too fast, headlights sweeping the driveway like searchlights. She got out in a panic, still wearing that necklace, still dressed in the soft cashmere she had chosen for the family performance. She tried the front door, locked, then the side, then the back. She called my phone, straight to voicemail. Finally, she screamed, loud and shrill, not from pain, but from the collapse of expectation. I watched from the window upstairs, arms crossed, silent. Then I made the last call of the night. "Hello," I said calmly. "I need to report an attempted break-in. My ex-wife." "No, she doesn't live here anymore. She was informed of that hours ago. Yes, I'd like her removed." When the police arrived, I met them at the door. Amy stood on the porch, hands shaking, eyes wide with disbelief. "You're calling the cops on me?" "You don't live here," I said simply. "But this is my house," she yelled. I looked at the officer, then back at her. "Not anymore." As they guided her off the property, I turned off the porch light. Inside, the silence returned, heavier than ever. I didn't feel peace. Not yet. But I felt control. And after months of being played, that was enough. For now. The morning after the police walked her off our porch, Amy sent 27 messages in under an hour. I didn't read them. I didn't have to. They came in bursts, half fury, half pleading, none of it surprising. One was just the word "why" in all caps. One said, "You ruined me." Another tried to throw the blame back, called me obsessed, paranoid, cruel. The rest were scattered. Photos of the kids, memories, even a selfie from 3 years ago with the caption, "You really want to destroy all this?" I archived them all. It wasn't about destroying something. It was about protecting what she thought would never fight back. That afternoon, I walked into the county courthouse with a folder 3 inches thick. Inside were printouts of forged tax return forms I had quietly requested from the IRS. One of them, filed 2 years ago, had a signature in my name, one I hadn't written. The refund had been redirected to a secondary checking account she opened under both our names, but which only she accessed. I had the routing numbers, the statements, even the login timestamps. The clerk who reviewed the documents didn't even blink. "Would you like to add fraud as a primary charge?" she asked, sliding a form across the desk. "Yes," I said, "and I'd like the accounts frozen until trial." That same day, I filed a separate motion. Not for custody, not yet. Just a request for a temporary protective order, based not on violence, but on neglect. I attached audio clips of Amy drinking in the living room while the kids were upstairs. One night she told Jared to just ignore the footsteps. They always go back to bed. Another night, she turned up music so loud it drowned out our youngest daughter's crying from the baby monitor. That wasn't just inconsiderate. That was evidence. The investigator I hired had cataloged everything. Dates, decibels, timestamps that matched the audio logs from our home hub. A folder called "In the Presence of Children" was now in the hands of Child Services. They called me 3 days later. "We've opened a preliminary case," the woman said. "The judge has granted temporary emergency measures. For now, she is not to have unsupervised contact with the children." It wasn't a victory. It was a shield. Amy's response was immediate and loud. First came the legal threats, through a second-rate attorney she'd retained with what little cash she still had access to. Then came the headlines she tried to create. "My ex is spying on me. He set me up." She filed a complaint, called it domestic surveillance, said I had violated her privacy, manipulated data. The judge reviewed the footage. The case was dismissed in less than 15 minutes. No proof of tampering, the clerk said, and no indication he acted outside the scope of protecting his property and children. Her attorney tried to protest, cited emotional distress, accused me of character assassination. The judge didn't even flinch. He collected facts, she said. You can't erase facts. Amy left the courtroom that day with her jaw locked and her mouth full of unspoken fury. Her posture screamed betrayal, but it wasn't the kind you feel from being wronged. It was the kind people show when they lose a game they thought they were rigging. The next day, I had all remaining financial ties cut. The last shared account, one she didn't even realize still existed, was closed and transferred to a legal trust under the children's names. Every dollar, every cent redirected. She tried to access it a week later. Her login attempt triggered a fraud alert. I got the email. I sat in the kitchen with the kids that night, watching them eat cereal and argue about cartoons. They didn't know what was happening yet. They didn't understand court orders or asset freezes. They just knew their rooms were still theirs, their clothes still warm from the dryer, and that I hadn't missed a bedtime in weeks. Amy, on the other hand, had gone completely silent. Not because she wanted to, because silence was all she had left. Then quietly, she slipped up again. She created a burner social media profile. The username was random, but the bio was almost laughably familiar. Strong, surviving, and smarter than you think. She used a photo I'd taken of her on our second anniversary. Sunlight, red dress, half smile like she was holding a secret. I didn't follow the account. I didn't block it. I just filed the screenshot under a new folder, attempts at bypass. It was a footnote now. She was a ghost circling a life she used to own. She wanted back in, not for the kids, not even for me, but for the image, the house, the stability, the illusion. She hadn't yet realized it was gone. That weekend, she showed up at her brother's house, one of the few family members who still answered her calls. He'd been cold with me since Thanksgiving, unsure of who to believe. But then I sent him a copy of the court documents. I didn't add commentary, just the facts. He texted back 2 hours later. I had no idea. I'm sorry. Amy stayed there 2 nights, tried to post filtered smiles from the guest room, tried to rebuild a narrative, but the timeline was too damaged now. Too many people had seen the truth. The cracks were no longer cracks. They were chasms, and she was still falling. By the time winter crept in and the streets turned gray with salt and frost, the story of Amy's fall wasn't whispered anymore. It was read, filed, stamped, and sitting on record in 3 separate legal departments. The fraud case had matured faster than even I expected. Once the forensic accountants reviewed the tax discrepancies, they didn't just confirm forgery, they found a pattern. Amy hadn't just signed my name once. She'd done it 4 times across 2 years, each time in pursuit of a refund routed to the same secondary account, the one she opened using my social security number. She hadn't thought I'd notice, but now the court had noticed. The judge froze all accounts bearing her name. Every card flagged, every balance seized under pending review. When she showed up in court, late, wrapped in a wool coat that still tried to fake elegance, her attorney was already floundering. She sat in silence as they read the findings aloud. Her only move was to glance my way, just once, as if checking whether I still cared enough to hesitate. I didn't. Child Services had moved quickly once the audio from our smart hub was officially reviewed by a state officer. Amy's parenting wasn't just inconsistent, it was reckless. Footage showed her drinking with Jared while the kids were home. One clip had her shouting over loud music, telling our daughter to figure it out herself when she cried from the stairs asking for water. That was all it took. The judge issued a restraining order, temporary at first, but then, as the investigation deepened, it became long-term. She could request supervised visits, but only after completing a family welfare evaluation and substance review. She never filed the request. Instead, she tried something else. She went public. A vague post on a healing blog went viral in the wrong way. In it, Amy portrayed herself as a victim of digital surveillance and emotional terrorism. She didn't use my name, but the timeline was clear enough. She called me controlling, obsessive, manipulative, said I weaponized technology to isolate her, that I built a false case around a crumbling marriage just to win custody. The post gained traction for about 6 hours. until someone shared the court filings in the comments. Copies of the fraud reports, the public restraining order, the family services report. Dozens of people flipped the narrative in real time. By that evening, the post had been deleted, but it was too late. Defamation is a slippery charge, but not when it's this clean. I filed a claim the next morning with the county attorney's office. Amy was summoned. When she arrived at the courthouse, she looked like she hadn't slept. No makeup, no smile, no entourage. I was venting, she told the judge. You were lying, the judge replied, and you did it in writing. Her claim was dismissed. Mine was accepted into review. The quiet that followed wasn't peace, it was vacuum. She stopped trying to reach out. No texts, no burner accounts, no late-night drive-bys, just nothing, like someone waiting out a storm they no longer believed they could outrun. One night I checked the kids' homework after dinner. My daughter had drawn a picture of the house. Just me, her brother, and our dog. No mom. I asked if she forgot someone. She looked at it for a second, then shook her head. No, she said. That's what home looks like now. It hit harder than anything Amy had thrown at me all year. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe for a moment. I just nodded and kept grading spelling lists. Later that night, as the kids slept and the dog curled against the foot of the couch, I opened the last 2 pages of the leather notebook. The first was blank. The second I dated, December 2nd. Final update, legal phase complete. Fraud case, filed. Court motion successful. Assets frozen. Child services, long-term restriction approved. Visitation pending welfare review. Defamation case, active. Response pending. Surveillance status, terminated. Cameras deactivated. No new incidents. Emotional contact attempts, 0. Threat level, dormant. Children, safe, present, healing. I closed the book and slid it into the lockbox beneath the stairs. Not a trophy, not a weapon. Just history, my side of it, written in ink, sharpened by truth. A few days later, the lawyer called. She'd received a message from Amy's new attorney, a desperate, toothless appeal for mediation. She says she wants closure, the lawyer said. I paused, then shook my head slowly, even though she couldn't see me. She doesn't want closure, I said. She wants a loophole. I didn't reply to Amy's request. I didn't respond when her brother tried to mediate either. He meant well, but he still thought she could be reasoned with. Amy had chosen her battlefield. She just didn't expect the man she betrayed to be the one holding the map. I stood in the doorway of the house one last time, just after sunrise, as the realtor's car rolled up the driveway. The kids were still asleep in the back seat of my car, curled under blankets with half-eaten granola bars in their laps. The sky was a dull gray, ordinary, unremarkable, but to me, it looked like rebirth. The house was empty now, stripped of its illusions. No more framed photos with forced smiles, no perfume drifting through the air from her vanity, no wine glasses left in the sink after another night of secrets. Just walls, just space, just air I could finally breathe without suspicion. It sold at auction. I didn't haggle. I didn't attach memories to the floorboards or bargain with nostalgia. I signed the papers, handed over the keys, and wired every dollar straight into a trust fund, one set up exclusively for the kids. 2 separate accounts, protected, monitored, untouchable by anyone but them when they turned 21. Not even I could draw from it now. The past was paid for. 3 days later, we boarded a plane. Seattle greeted us with cold rain and silence. I welcomed both. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with thin walls and a view of a gray skyline. But it was ours. No ghosts, no history. I set up a room for the kids, bunk beds, a shared desk, a wall of posters they picked out at a dollar store. They didn't care that it wasn't a big house. They just cared that I was there. I took a new job, cybersecurity, mid-tier firm, remote friendly. Nothing glamorous, but clean, quiet. I worked during school hours, walked them to the park after, cooked spaghetti on the stove while they laughed at the same cartoons every night. It wasn't healing, not yet, but it was something better. It was still. That's when I started writing. Not about Amy, not about the lies or the tapes or the courtrooms. I wrote about digital rights in marriage, how to protect your identity, your finances, your data. I wrote about hidden apps, forged logins, and the quiet war of modern deceit. I launched a blog under a pseudonym, just initials. At first it barely moved, but then the stories started coming. Anonymous emails, confessions, quiet cries from people who thought they were alone. I wrote every night. The blog grew, not viral, not loud, but steady. One night, around 2 in the morning, I got a message through the comment portal. It wasn't signed, but I knew who it was. The username was random, the message short. I know you're reading this, just, please, one call. I didn't reply. I pulled the IP from the backend, traced it, routed through a proxy, but the origin bounced from a cafe 6 blocks away from where she used to live. The same place she once met Jared. She hadn't let go. Not really. She thought she could still slip in through a digital crack. I forwarded the message to my attorney and called the officer assigned to our restraining order. He filed it under repeat violation. The court extended the restriction by another year. That night I walked out onto the apartment balcony. The city was quiet, only the occasional car, the hum of distant trains. I looked out into the fog and realized I didn't feel the need to check my phone anymore. I didn't feel watched. I didn't feel small. I was no longer the man documenting his own unraveling. I was the one who rebuilt everything from the wreckage. Amy hadn't just lost access to me. She lost the illusion that I would always be waiting, that I'd forgive enough to give her a thread to crawl back along. What she never understood was that silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes silence is a door being locked, for good. She was out there somewhere now, cut off from the house she thought she could keep, the accounts she thought she could drain, and the children she thought would forgive without question. And I was here, on a new street, under a new sky, with clean air in my lungs and 2 kids asleep in the room beside mine, safe, dreaming, untouched by the poison she poured into our lives. In the end, I didn't burn her. I buried her, in facts, in court records, in everything she signed and never read. Her story ended the second she forgot that I was paying attention. And mine? Mine was just beginning. That's all for now, folks. Thank you for being with me today and listened. And if you liked my story, please subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below what you think about all this, and what would you do if you were me. Also, don't forget to check my other stories in description below.